Greetings, everyone. This is Pave, your host, your friend, your coach. Today, I have another great friend for you, my new good friend, Laurelann Porter from Pennsylvania, tropical Pennsylvania. And not as tropical as Brazil, but still, speaking of
Right,
Brazil,
not quite.
we both spend a fair amount of time in Brazil. That's one way that we really connected. And then we met, about a month ago through an event that our dear common friend and my publisher and alumni of my academy, the one and only Mary Gooden, hosted. And
Right,
as soon as you
right.
mentioned Brazil, I woke up. I said I wasn't sleeping. And that really caught my attention. So I said, I want to connect with you. And because my heart and soul is still in Brazil, you know?
Oh, my heart resides in
Oh,
Brazil
yes. Oh, yes. We
forever. I
can
don't
do
think
an
it's ever going
entire
back.
podcast, not episode, podcast just on Brazil, you know?
Right, right.
Brasilinidades, you know what I mean? Talking about that.
Todas as brasilidades, yes, os
Exatamente.
jeitinhos, né?
Exatamente. Exatamente. Minha rainha. Ele é minha rainha. Anyway, so powerful profile, powerful story. So in a nutshell, she was a professor, um, but then in May 2020, her world fell through medical issues, and then she couldn't face her students, telling them anything as she didn't believe and pretend that what she was teaching them was true. And she started to have her awakening and see through the veil and the BS, and that awakened her own awakening. And as a result, she's been on a different path, and she's become a shamanic energy. I mean, now she's a shamanic energy medicine specialist, expert, and she's also a songwriter. That's amazing because the song that she writes, the songs are coming through when she does her shamanic healing, which is absolutely fascinating. We're gonna dive into that. And she's also trained in dream trending, which is just the name alone. Wow, can't wait to hear more. Because in a
I'm like, where
nutshell,
do we even begin?
I know, which is basically communicating with your dreams
Yeah,
and all that good stuff. And she also has a YouTube channel, and so a lot of good
right.
stuff. And of course, her heart is still in Brazil because she spent a fair amount of time in Brazil. We're gonna talk about that. But anyways, Laurelann, my friend, welcome, bem-vinda.
Thank you, thank you. Obrigada. It's very good to be
Nada.
here. Um,
Wow.
so I guess what I could do is just kind of give some highlights about the story that you so generously shared.
Sure.
Um, it is true. I imagine that everybody had some kind of a crisis or another during COVID. For me, it was really more of a mental health crisis than
Mhm.
it just happened to coincide with some other medical diagnoses that were due to, I was over 50 and I had chronic pain and chronic fatigue. And I really just thought that's how life was. I just was like, oh, life is painful and exhausting. And that's just the way it is. And I was sort of just facing that, what I thought was reality. And when I realized that there were a couple of actual physical conditions underneath that were causing the pain and the fatigue, it was like, oh, no wonder it came with anxiety and depression, because why wouldn't you be depressed if you were always in pain and always exhausted? So, and what I realized is that mental and physical health crisis was the result of a life of workaholism.
Mm.
So my name is Laurelann Porter, and I'm a recovering workaholic.
Ah.
you know, it's so funny because when we got on and you were talking about, oh, I'm busy, busy is good. And I'm like, I sometimes have to remind myself to take naps and remind myself that sometimes it's okay to just do nothing. And
Absolutely.
sometimes in the doing of the nothing is when the most magic happens.
Absolutely.
So yeah, exactly. It's like we have to allow things to happen. So when I had my crisis, it was actually creativity that really first saved me when in 2020, when I just sort of was like, okay, the world is going to hell. I'm not really sure what's happening, but it was a political shit show. I mean, it was just a nightmare. And I was like, this is craziness. And I was like, our democracy is going down the toilet. I mean, I was convinced that we were at the end of the world.
Mm.
And so So my partner and I, we made an album. I was like, I can't, in the face
Wow.
of this craziness, I can't do nothing. So we looked at kind of all the bits of songs that we had been writing together, over the years, because he had his job and I had my job, and we always had jobs preventing us from actually really truly being our creative selves. And so we made an album, and it was a really just beautiful experience. It was the middle of COVID, we're in lockdown, and we were actually in our garage in the backyard. And it was so therapeutic to just be out in the fresh air with some color, some paper to work at the university. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I had to try to write an email that was work related, and it took me 2 days just to figure out how to write that email, because everything felt like a lie. Everything in my life felt like a lie, and I just couldn't do it. Somehow managed to figure out how to get a medical leave of absence. Actually, HR gives you the forms and then some, and you have to go figure out what to do with them, right?
Yeah.
And had luckily, and I advocate for everybody, have a team of people that support you. Don't rely on just one doctor. Don't rely on just one shaman. Don't rely on just one therapist. I had a naturopath, an acupuncturist, a rheumatologist, and a therapist. And it's a good thing I had those four, because my medical care provider, my primary care physician, she was awful to me. She refused to sign my paperwork because I was
Wow.
refusing to take the medicine she wanted to give me. So when I took one more semester to try to figure out what was wrong with me, my colleagues, who were so awesome, they were so wonderful, and they were like, take your time, we just want you to get better. And I was like, what if there is no better? What
Mm.
if this is all there is? One semester off from my job is not going to cure that.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually went back to a technique that I learned in graduate school when I was getting my PhD. And we call it critical autoethnography.
Mm.
And what that is it's the study of culture of our own, of our own self culture. And the critical part of it is in understanding what are our inherited beliefs and systems that we've taken on, usually unconsciously, that we need to then go, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if I really want to still believe that or still do that. And it takes a lot of deep reflexive practices. It takes a lot of observation of our own physical being and our own environment, observing our habits. And so then through that whole process, I was able to get to a bit of a place of grounding. I was doing tarot readings for myself every day. The tarot started telling me
Wow.
I needed to meditate every day. And I was like, well, if I promised myself I would do the tarot and the tarot is telling me to meditate, I better start meditating. And then a few months later, it was like, I realized I was having so much more clarity and focus and energy just from those daily practices of the meditation. And so then all of a sudden I was like on my big bandwagon, come on, everybody meditate. It's so good for you. It feels great. It's really wonderful. And so by this time I was back into the university setting. And because I was running my own department, I was able to really pick and choose what classes I could teach. And so I kind of gave myself a sort of easy load. I had like senior portfolio, which is the work I love doing, just helping people finish, whatever process they're in and moving out into the world. And in that semester that I came back, my colleagues and I, we were also in the process of collectively organizing. We didn't have a union, but we were collectively organizing to say, hey, here's some working conditions that, COVID has made us realize that we need to change some things in order for us to feel satisfied and rewarded and blah, blah, blah. And we spent weeks on this document, weeks to get
Wow.
all, I think there were 12 or 15 of us or something that were all agreeing to these requests. We didn't want to call them demands. There were folks who thought demand was too strong a word. And after all that effort to try to work together to make our work site a more conducive place for fulfillment, 48 hours after we sent it up the food chain, the answer was just a flat out no on all counts.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, then I'm done. I'm done. And the next day I put in my resignation. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Well, I kind of knew what I was going to do, because by this point, when I had started meditating, then I started looking around at all these places that I had been interested in the past. And that's when I looked up the Pacifica Graduate Institute and their dream tending program. That's when I looked up my old mentor in Germany who does integral deep listening. That's when I looked up Alberto Villoldo and the Four Winds Society. And I was like, wow, I read his book 20 years ago. And I really wanted to be a shaman when I read his book 20 years ago. But at the time, I thought it was crazy and no one does that. And I needed to do the sensible thing and get my PhD and get a job and be a professor and blah, 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 blah. Right. And when I realized that life was no longer for me, I sold my car to pay for shaman school. And
Wow.
and then that's it. The whole story changed. The whole story changed.
Wow. We'll dive into that in a moment, but now that's a fascinating story. I would like to tell us a little bit. We're going to talk about your business, your impact, and all that in a moment. What I want to know is, tell us, who's Laurelann as a person, as a human being, as a woman, first and foremost?
Wow. It's funny because when we walk this path, we recognize that the titles we give ourselves and the roles we play are always temporary.
Yes.
And we can choose to play those roles and choose to use those titles. I call myself a shamanic artist. And so maybe I can start by describing what that is, because for me right now, that is really central to how I view myself as a human being in the world. I've always been musical. I was singing, as a kid with my family. We sang in church, that same old story. So music has always been a part of my life. But what I didn't know until the last few years was that singing is also part of my medicine.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's sort of, I found out in these sort of like accidental ways, right? So when they train us, when you go to the Four Winds Society, they train you in a very specific and very rigid kind of program. But then when you get to the very, very end, they say, okay, now go make it your own. So for me to go through all that and say, wait, like I'm doing it all what if I don't know what to do? What if I don't know how to fly and I jump off the cliff? But I just, it's the same old story. I just had to keep trusting that somehow it was going to be made clear to me what is my particular very unique gift, whatever that is. And there's a few, I have always been a questioner, right? Even when I didn't know what that meant. Someone who, like many, many, many years ago, when I was, working at a bank, I had an old boss give me a letter of recommendation for some other job or something like that. And he was like, Laurelann is a questioner. And I was like, oh, I don't even really know what that means. But actually, yeah. I really can't accept things just at face value unless I really understand them a little more fully. And yet at the same time, what I've learned through shamanic energy medicine is that it's impossible to know everything. We have to leave space for the mysteries.
It's a mysteries that make life juicy.
They do. And it's so much more fun when we really allow space for that. Because, when you get a PhD, you have to go through all the, sort of academic rationalist approaches to things. And those are really great skills to have. And I'm actually really grateful that I went through that. But to understand, in a funny way, getting my PhD prepared me for this, because I had to unlearn everything I knew when I did my doctoral program. And I think that made me ready to consciously unlearn everything I thought I knew.
So what is your PhD on about?
Theater and performance of the Americas.
Oh, now that is intriguing.
Right. And that's, my focus was Afro-Brazilian religious practices, and especially the dances of the Orishas.
Oh, now you got my full attention, my friend. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And there was something that we'll just give a little tidbit of that story. So that all came about when I had already been going to Brazil for years because both of my ex-husbands are Brazilian, which is its own other story. But when I was right, when I was thinking about going to Brazil, someone was like, "Oh, you got to go study dance with this guy, Augusto Omolu. He's a Brazilian guy, but he works in Denmark with the Odin Theater." And I was like, "Great." And the opportunity came up, and I went to England and met him for the first time. And there he was doing this workshop on these Afro-Brazilian dances. And afterward, and he worked us so hard. This was 4 hours of constant high energy dance movement. There was literally actually one moment where we were moving across the floor, I don't know, leaping around or something like that. And I had to stop. Like my whole body just couldn't move anymore. Like I felt my whole body just say, "Nope, you're done, go sit down." And I just couldn't even move. And so we worked this really hard, but every day at noon, he's like, "Oh, by the way, every time I finish working out like this, I always go have lunch and a beer. Does anybody want to join me?" And I'm like, that sounds like a great opportunity to get to know this guy. And that's where I really got to understand some of the sort of deeper philosophy of those religious practices and the sort of cosmology of, in his world it was candomblé. I'm not an initiate of candomblé. I do not say that I'm a, as my friend says, I'm a frequentador de casa de candomblé. I occasionally visit terreiros, but the way he explained it in different ways, and the dances really help you understand that in a physical way. It's not about good or evil or right or wrong. It's about balance. And when we are out of balance, things start to go amiss in our lives. Things start to, wreak havoc in our lives when we are out of balance. And so it's really all about balance. And there's even this great quote when I was doing my dissertation fieldwork. I was part of this research nucleus in Bahia, and the one who ran the group was this Brazilian linguist, Rui Povos. And one of his quotes that I just loved so much is he said, "For the Nago, movement is so important that even their prayers are danced."
wow.
Right?
But if you
And
look
you
at
can't.
things, yeah, sorry. If you look at things, prayer in a way, it doesn't matter what religion, it's a kind of like a dance in a way, like a
You can look at it that
choreographed
way,
dance, you know?
right? Well,
Wow.
and sometimes it's totally improvised, which is the way I really love to do things.
Exactly. Me too. Oh, don't follow anyone.
Right, right.
Not a fan.
So anyway, that's I really and when I understood it that way, I was like, "Oh man, the world needs this kind of awareness right now. The world needs to stop, looking at good and evil and this bad person and that bad person, and we need to stop pointing at each other, and we need to stop calling each other names and labels." And so I was really kind of passionate about learning more about not just the dances, but also the religion and the philosophy behind it. And so that's my little side note. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that story. But just to answer who I am as a person, everybody who knows me knows I love Brazil. And so it's always going to come into the conversation. At
Really?
least.
I would have guessed that. That's the reason
But,
you're here. I'm joking.
right, exactly. Well, and the other thing that's really important to me, not just that I'm musical, but I love making music. I love creating music. I consider my house to be a beautiful, loving, happy home because this is a home where music is made.
Mm.
So that probably is the core heart of who I am as a person. I want to be where music is made.
That's quote worthy. I love that. Seriously, I'm not joking. Put on a t-shirt,
I want to be where music is made. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna actually, you know what? I'm gonna write this down.
Right?
I
Great.
want to be where music is.
My partner and I have a phrase. We say, "Write it down now. It can be stupid later."
Say that
Because
again.
I have Write it down now. It can be stupid later, because sometimes we don't think an idea is good enough because we think it's stupid before we really have a chance to let it germinate. So if you get an idea, write it down. Don't judge it. It can be stupid later, but it can't be anything if you don't write it down.
You know, on my computer, on my phone, I have an entire notepad, entire file full of quotes, not only from famous people, also people I get to talk on my podcast, and just with 2 lines from you. I want to be where music is. Write it down. It can be stupid later. Signed, Laurelann Porter. Yes.
Right? Exactly.
Wow. Amazing. I love how this has started. What I want to do now is let's have some fun.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know you as a person. Ready?
Okay, here we go.
All right. What makes you happy?
Music and creativity.
Not Brazil? I'm joking.
Well, if the happiest I can be is singing music on a beach in Bahia, Brazil, with some fellow musicians who are awesome people and talented, and that makes me happy for sure.
Ana caipirosca con morango, eh?
It's funny. I do still occasionally have a cocktail once in a while, but I don't drink nearly as much as I used to. So what I do is I'll go and I'll do my whole show totally sober. Everybody else is just drinking away, and then I'll have one caipirinha at the end of the night just to give it a nice little finish off.
You know, I don't believe you, because once you start having one caipi, and before you know it, it ends up in 20 caipirinhas.
No, my friends and I have learned that 5 is the limit. One should never, ever go past 5.
It's never one. It's never one. It's usually 3 or 4. You know what I mean? Because those are dangerous.
Right.
It tastes
they are
like juices. You don't know it, but then it hits you.
Yeah. I was on vacation in Rio one time with a couple of crazy Australians, and they were like, "Laurelann, will you go order us another one of those drinks we can't pronounce?"
Caipirinha.
Right. These poor Australian guys, they just couldn't pronounce it.
Just
but
give
yeah,
me
they
KP.
were
Just give me KP. Just say that.
right.
As a French would do like this, That's a French symbol for let's go drink.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Now, what makes you smile?
What makes me smile? Friendship, beauty. I also have a pretty wicked sense of humor.
You do?
I do. Okay. I know people think I'm all sunshiny and roses, but I sometimes have a bit of a dark humor streak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I can't think of any particular examples right now, but my son recognizes that we appreciate gallows humor, like, especially, I've, for whatever reason, I've experienced a lot of loss and death in my life, and so I just happen to have gotten pretty good at grief. And invariably, there's always like the first impact where it's just nothing but tears and tears and tears, and then usually within a few hours, or maybe the next day, the comedy starts coming in and we start having to make each other laugh. So I'm a fan of gallows humor.
Love that. Now let's take the happiness factor a couple of notches higher. What makes your heart sing? What sets your soul on fire?
There's something about the sensation when I'm singing in front of people, and it doesn't have to be a huge crowd. It can be 5, 10, 15 people. When I'm singing in front of people and I can feel that they can feel that there's something happening there that's special. And this is the other thing that I sort of found out accidentally, is that I didn't know until people started telling me that my voice opens healing portals. I was told that when I sing, angels come down and sing with me. And I was like, oh, well, okay. And I kind of freaked some people out once. It was like an open jam session at this place I like to go to in Bahia on the beach in Brazil. And there happened to be a musician there that also spoke English and knew the blues. And so I got up and I was like, hey, do me a favor, just play me a slow blues in D minor. And so he he was able to, because I don't actually know, in Portuguese they don't use A, B,
Very
C, D.
specific.
Yeah,
And
like
D minor.
him and
Okay.
him. I don't remember actually. So I had to ask him to translate what the key signature was. And so, and I did one of my own songs, one of my own original songs, which is it's oh my gosh, it's called Passion Fruit Blues.
Mm.
And it's from one of my solo performance pieces that I have done. And it's a bisexual love triangle about a blues singer who meets
Mm.
a woman at a funeral, and they sort of fall in love. Like it's the wife of the husband that died, and so they end up falling in love with each other. But the song, it's a very sensual, sexual song. And so I got up there, and I guess, except when my head is totally shaved, I guess I'm a sort of unassuming looking kind of person. And so when I walk on stage and then my voice takes over, it was crazy. I wasn't even aware of it, but people came up to me and they said that as soon as I started singing, this is like a bar. This is a patio bar. As soon as I started singing, the whole energy shifted. Everyone looked over and it was like, and
Mm.
I sang, and it was great, and it was wonderful. And then afterwards, someone came up to me and he was like, "Wow, that was really amazing. How did you do that?" And I was like, "Well, I am a shaman and my voice is part of my medicine." And he looked at me like he thought maybe I had just done some witchcraft on everybody while I was singing. And he kind of
Wow.
like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I trust you anymore."
Oh, wow. That's funny. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. But really, that sensation, you can feel it when you're singing and the music is good and people are loving it. Like that lights my soul on fire for sure.
Amazing. Amazing. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
Oh. um well, boy, I I have a very low tolerance for hypocrisy.
Mm.
And so this makes it very difficult to try to follow politics at all,
Mhm.
because even when there is a party or a candidate that officially, espouses my values,
Mhm.
um, it's there's so much hypocrisy and there's just so much two-facedness that I have to just generally set myself apart from it and just take a step above it and just try and just understand, like they're on their own path, they're doing their own thing.
Yeah.
It's not for me to cling to it and get my panties in a bunch over it and be all distraught and torn up like I was, right? In 2020, I was looking at, I was like, I really literally thought democracy was going down the toilet globally, not just in the United States. And I was seeing the way, certain politicians, both in Brazil and in the United States, were so divisive that families
Yeah.
were having these huge rifts, and friendships were ending.
Yes.
Lifelong friendships were ending over
I lost
this.
some friends because of just a comment or a post or a like. That's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I mean, if the more we can learn to accept and embrace multiple perspectives, even if we don't agree with them, to just accept and embrace them as like, okay, that's your perspective. I don't believe the same way, but I'm still going to respect you as a human being. And I'm still going to allow you to have autonomy over your physical body, not like some people would like to not have us do. But that's a whole other can of
Yeah,
worms we're not going to open, right?
absolutely. Wow. Fascinating. What scares you other than
What scares
spiders?
me? um, so I will say that what scares me has shifted over
Mhm.
time. Um, there there was a time, actually, another one woman show that I wrote called How Not to Make Love to a Woman, was about leaving an abusive marriage. And when I was working on the script, a friend of mine who had been a producer of mine, I was like, oh, I don't know how I want to write this. I don't want people to look at me as a victim. I don't want it to be a comparison of whose story is worse. I don't want it to be about that. And she was like, okay, well, what is your biggest artistic fear? And I said, stand-up comedy. Because I've always been really funny on accident. And every time I try to be funny on purpose, it's generally just a horrible mess. And I was like, that scares me more than anything, is to try to get up on stage and actually try to be funny on purpose. So I faced that fear. I don't think I have that fear anymore. I'm not going to be a stand-up comic anytime soon, but at least I faced it. I got over it. I did the thing. But, you know, I don't really feel a whole lot of fear anymore now that I've been walking this path, because everything is a learning experience.
Oh, yes.
And I just find that I don't find myself in situations that are frightening very much anymore. It's almost like the universe is just guiding me and protecting me away from those things. I mean, I've been in situations where there were gunshots fired and we had to duck and nobody knew what was going on. And that was really scary. And I imagine if I were in that situation again, I would also still be scared. But in terms of like, oh, like what am I afraid to do? I try not to live with fear. I try to just do what I want to do and not let fear hold me back. And my recent, not fear, but my recent challenge that I've been working through is the fear of failure and fear of making mistakes. Boy, that one was a doozy to try to face.
Yeah. How did you solve it?
I just had to cultivate this habit. Well, I also worked with a shaman who also does tapping, which was really incredibly helpful. But I cultivated this mindset that even when I do fail, I still have value. Even when I do make mistakes, I still have value. Even when I think I'm failing, there's still something happening that's productive and good and a learning lesson. So I really just, it wasn't that. So now I don't look at failure as the thing to avoid. Now I'm like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna do things and see if I make mistakes or not. And it's kind of, I'm still learning it. I've still got little, because I've been a perfectionist and I've been a workaholic. And so I've been somebody who likes to just do things right and do it right the first time. And so it's still a process to learn, like, okay, I'm gonna just allow myself grace. I'm gonna forgive myself. I'm gonna forgive myself for my past mistakes. I'm gonna forgive myself for not doing the right thing ever. And whatever shortcomings we think we have, a forgiveness practice can be a really powerful way to move past those.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say is your number one personal superpower?
I mean, it just seems so like I open portals with my voice. That seems like the obvious one. But I think also someone once told me, she said, you're a cultural translator. And I look at that in a variety of different ways, because culture can be defined any number of ways depending on who you are and what the circumstances are. But I think it's maybe because I have traveled quite a bit and I have lived in another country more so than the average US American. Or maybe there's some other reason, but to be able to inhabit two different worlds like that and to understand two different cultures, it's actually why we named our band The Rhythm and the Flavor. Because when I was getting my PhD, and my partner, who was like, I was like, I need a regular person to bounce my ideas off to make sure I'm not off in, some, area that no one's going to pay attention to or understand. And so we came up with this idea together that the best way to get to know another culture is through the rhythms and the flavors.
Oh, you're speaking my language. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because for about 5 minutes, I thought I was going to write my dissertation on how to translate flavor, but then I ended up writing
Say
about
that
something
again.
else.
That's another code word you think. The best way to experience a culture is through what? Say that again.
The rhythms and the flavors, because that is the name of our band, The Rhythm and the Flavor.
Ah, wow. The best way to experience a culture.
Is through the rhythms
Yeah.
and flavors. And you
Sign.
can find our album on Spotify, the 2020 album, Comfort Food, which got me through the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. What is one thing that you used to value that you don't value anymore?
Something that I used to value that I don't value anymore. I think that's a trick question because I think I just value things differently now.
Mhm.
So I think I used to value, my education. You know, I have 3 degrees, right? I think I used to value that artificially for the credential. But actually, what I value it for is all those experiences. My bachelor's degree in theater, my master's degree in playwriting, my PhD in theater and performance of the Americas, those experiences, those educational learning experiences, it doesn't matter if I have a piece of paper with my name on it and a couple of letters, but those experiences really made me. They really contributed to who I am as a person. I learned so many life lessons in addition to, whatever, the philosophy and the sociology and the social justice and blah blah blah.
Wow. Now, on the other side, what is one thing that you did not value, but now you're valuing more and more?
Mm, something that I didn't value before that I value now. Again, I think I value friendships differently now. I think that I now value my friendships as my chosen family.
Indeed.
Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful. Love that. Awesome. Let's move forward. You love traveling.
Okay. I do love traveling. Yeah.
We can do an entire episode just on traveling, and we may do that another time.
Right.
But I'd like to take you down a different type of travel, down memory line. Go back
Oh,
to
okay.
when we're kids growing up, people around us, family, relatives, neighbors, teachers, friends, always ask us, "Hey, Laurelann, what do you want to become when you grow up?" What was the answer to that as a little girl?
As a little girl, I wanted to be a movie star. And then I have, like, from when I was in 5th grade, our little like paper yearbook that we had. Apparently, I wanted to be a journalist. So as a little girl, I wanted to perform and I wanted to write. And somehow I knew both of those things.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Growing up, what was your relationship with school? Did you love school or did you hate school?
I loved school. I was really good at it and it was very easy for me. And I think it even made some of my older siblings a little jealous that I got better grades than them. But yeah, I've always loved, even as a kid, I would look forward to the first day of school because it was when I would get to see all my friends again.
What was your favorite subject?
Well, obviously besides music, I really always loved any of the language arts, the English classes, literature. I was really, really big into those.
Was there any?
Also, I was really good at math too, believe it or not. I used
Oh
to love
wow.
math. Yeah, not anymore. I'm not allowed to do math anymore.
Was there any subject you couldn't stand?
Well, it's so funny because the things I care most about now, I didn't like I didn't like the social studies and the
Oh,
history, and now I'm like that's where we really need to go. That's what we need to study.
imagine that we were in the same class in grade 10, 11. What kind of student were you? Were you the shy type, the quiet one, the nerd one, the chatterbox, the life of the party, the superstar?
I was the one that was in every extracurricular that I could possibly be in. I actually had to like get special requests to be in multiple. So I'm going to say this word and I'm going to apologize in advance because it's a pejorative, awful word, but we used to call ourselves band fag, choir fag, drama fag. That was what we called ourselves. So I apologize for the term, but
Or
you know, as someone in drama, band, choir, um, including marching band, I was the drum major of the band. I was the one that conducted the band. So in a way that's all really nerdy, but I was also very gregarious and I liked talking to people always, I think.
so were you popular with the boys in school?
Oh, I mean, I had my boyfriends, but the things I had to learn about what love and romance were, it's like so embarrassing to me to look back at my 16-year-old self and be like, oh my God, I really thought I was so into that whole romantic idea that like somebody was gonna sweep me off my feet and it was, you know, um, so yeah, I mean, I had my boyfriends, but I wouldn't say I was popular with the boys.
Okay. What was your very first job? And do you remember how much you got paid the first time you worked?
Oh, my first job was working at McDonald's, if you could believe that.
Woohoo.
Yeah, I think at the time we were paid like $3.65 an hour or something like that.
What were you doing in the kitchen or the cash? What were you
No,
doing?
I was at the front counter,
Okay.
Yep, yep,
Cool. Cool.
in that awful brown polyester uniform.
Cool. 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 Um, let's move forward. How would
Yeah.
you describe your path from the moment you left school to now? Would you say it was pretty much straight sailing, smooth forward as soon as you get into one lane, you were set for life? Or was it
Hell
more like
no.
turns and twists, like a roller coaster?
Oh, hell no. My journey has been like so all over the place. I was telling someone the other day, like I literally had someone say to me, you need to learn how to narrate yourself. Now
Mm.
I know. Now I see how all of those weird trajectories, and now I see how they all fit together. The random years I spent in Brazil, the years I spent living in Boston, growing up in Arizona, the singing, the theater, the ethnography, all of it. It sounds like a pile of chaos from the outside, but those are all threads of how I have become who I am,
Mm.
because theater and performance at its real core for me personally is about the ritual.
No.
And so my 40 years in theater, that's really where I love the seeds of ritual. It's not just from the shamanic training that I did back in 2021. So and then even just the things that I did in my graduate school about learning that critical autoethnography, that actually saved me from a very dark place, right?
Wow.
And even playwriting and screenwriting. Now I help teach people how to write their own life screenplay, how to write
Mm.
their own mythology. So I actually use one of my screenwriting books to kind of teach them how to really approach what you're facing in your life through that model of the hero's journey. It's the standard one that everybody uses, but to consciously look at it as what am I facing right now? Am I facing a dark night of the soul? Am
Mm.
I facing a threshold guardian? Am I facing the mysterious seductress? Am I having my reconciliation with the father figure? These are all they're archetypal encounters that we have sometimes in life. And so when we can look at how we're going through them and consciously narrate them, we can guide our journey a little better.
Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about something that you're both passionate about. How did Brazil come into your life?
Okay, I can say this because the statute of limitations has passed. Um,
Okay.
yep, so I can't be arrested for it. But when I was living in Boston, the guy that was the drummer in the band I was in Boston, he just one day sat me down and he said, "Hey, would you ever consider marrying someone for their green card? And if so, would you do it for me?" And I was like, "Oh," and I like, wow. I don't know. I really had, because honestly, I didn't have a very good set of role models growing up for marriage, and so for many years I was very anti-marriage. I don't believe in the institution of marriage. I think a piece of paper does not guarantee that people are going to love each other or respect each other or anything. All it does is make attorneys money when you get divorced. So
And get the government
I'm
involved
not
in your personal life.
right, exactly. So I don't, if people want to get married, great, you do you. For me, my partner and I, we're not into marriage. But so when he asked me if I would marry him for his green card, I went to work the next day and I told one of my buddies at work, I was like, "Dave, you're not going to believe this. Lazaro just asked me if I would marry him for his green card. Isn't that crazy?" And he's like, "No, the craziest thing is you're actually considering it." So, and it was actually easy to do because he was such a very dear friend. We were in a band together. He was my drummer. We wrote music together. You know what I mean? And so to be able to tell immigration the story of how we met, we just really told the story of how we met as musicians and then, enhanced it a bit.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And he's still a very dear friend of mine to this day. I talk to him more than I talk to my actual ex-husband that I married for quote unquote love.
So did that first marriage, friendly marriage, lead to
Yeah.
feelings?
I am not going to. I think it would be best for me to not elaborate on that. We have a very good friendship.
Okay.
We never became romantic.
Okay.
And that's where I'll just leave it at that.
So that's how you ended up in Brazil the first time?
Yeah. So it was he offered me basically to take me to Brazil and meet his family. And so and
Ah.
I think he gave me some money and I bought a motorcycle with it. So it was a win-win situation. And when I went to Brazil and met the people there, I just was so struck by how just open and friendly and warm and welcoming every single person was that I met. I was like, how is it possible for all these people to just be, because I was in the city of Curitiba, which is down in the south of Brazil. And among Brazilians, Curitiba has a reputation for being a bit uptight and stuffy. But compared to US Americans, they're so warm and loving and open. And so for me, I think I felt like I finally found my people. I think that's why I have more culture shock when I come back to the
Oh
States than when
yes.
I go to Brazil.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's where your love for Brazil started. How long did you stay the first time that you went in Brazil?
Oh, well, that's the other part of the funny story. So it was only supposed to be 2 months because the guitar player had a friend with a studio in Curitiba. The drummer was from a different city. So we were going to go to Brazil and we were going to record an album and we were going to go back to Boston. Well,
Mm.
I didn't realize that the guitar player had ulterior motives and he wanted me to stay longer. So he was the one that sort of encouraged me to get involved with the new drummer, who then became
Ah.
my husband. So the big joke is like, immigration is like, what, does this woman have a thing for Brazilian drummers or something?
That's your niche. If that's your niche, sister,
And then I'm like, well, who wouldn't,
have
right?
fun.
Who doesn't have a thing for Brazilian drummers? Um, so oh shoot, now I lost my train of thought. Okay, so there I was only supposed to go for 2 months,
Mm. And you stayed for
but
20,
because the guitar, huh?
and you stayed for 20 years.
No, I stayed for, I guess it ended up being just about 1 year.
Okay.
Because after a month, I actually sent a fax to my work because we didn't really have. I sent a fax to my work saying, hire somebody to replace me. I'm going to stay here. I don't know when I'm coming back.
Okay.
Then, ended up getting pregnant and I decided I wanted to have my child in the States for a variety of reasons. And so when I was 6 months pregnant, I came back to the States. So that was how my first trip to Brazil was. I stayed a year and got pregnant. That's probably not the most ideal role model to talk about.
When you were in Brazil, what was one thing about the US that you missed the most?
Well, at the time, and especially when I was pregnant, I was craving bagels with cream cheese because they don't really do bagels in Brazil. And
Seriously?
they yeah, and now I don't even eat that anymore. But at the time I was like, oh God, I really just want a bagel and cream cheese because they have requeijão. Do you know
Oh yeah,
requeijão?
oh
I
yeah,
don't really like requeijão. Requeijão to me tastes like plastic cheese.
yeah.
Um, but so yeah, it was bagels and cream cheese that was the thing I really just couldn't get in Curitiba that I really wanted, and that was what I missed.
What is one thing that really blew your mind away in Brazil?
Well, when I was flying in and I just saw how green everything was, because I'm originally from Arizona, where everything, I mean, as a teenager, I was like, everything's dead and brown. There's nothing alive here. As an adult, I came back and realized that the desert has its own life and its own beauty. It's just different than the lush green
Mhm.
of Brazil.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first caipirinha?
My first caipirinha would have
What a
probably
question to ask,
been,
eh?
I know, right? I'm like,
You're not expecting that.
I was probably in Boston when I lived in Boston and was hanging out with Brazilians, and those people know how to party. So
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure someone made some caipirinhas and I had
that
some.
would be a great icebreaker among Brazilians. You go to Brazil, you just stop some. Hey, when was your first caipirinha? Do you remember? Say what?
Oh, I
I'm gonna
can't
try that
imagine.
actually with my Brazilian friends. That's gonna be a fun one.
Nobody's gonna remember the first caipirinha.
Oh, the first caipirinha is like the first kiss. We'll always remember it. You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, maybe.
Cool. And then after that, you were frequently coming back to Brazil, or was Brazil just a thing that passed?
Well, yeah, no. Well, I for the 3 years that I was married to my son's father, we did try to. Well, we came here for a while, and then he there was he had a green card, but it was complicated for him to get a job, and so we went back to Brazil for another year, and then there was there was some economic crisis in whatever year it was. The problem with a country like Brazil is their currency is not usually very stable. And so about every 5 years or so there's some destabilization of the currency. And
Was
at
it
the
in the
time,
late 90s when the
I think
Cruzeiro
it was
switched to Real? Mm.
well, the Cruzeiro switching to the Real, I think, was in 85
Ah, okay, okay. Maybe that was way
when
before.
someone stole all the money. um but this one I know, right? This one was, I think it was like, well, my son would have been, it's probably right around 2000.
Mm.
And the problem was I was making money in Brazil as teaching English. I was teaching English to business people. That's actually how I started teaching, if you can believe it, was teaching English to Brazilians. And so when I was teaching English in Brazil, I was making money in reais. But I had a few bills in the United States in dollars. And so when the currency got devalued, it was like getting my income cut in half. And so my then husband, we were like, this is not going to work. We need to go to the States because we need to be making money in dollars to pay the bills in dollars rather than making money in reais to pay the bills in reais. So that was when we came back. And then of course the divorce happened. And so I didn't go to Brazil quite as often, and it was a few more years in between. And I definitely found that I didn't want to go to his city anymore. I've been back a few times since then. That was 20 years ago. But I really fell in love with Bahia. And so
Oh, yeah.
people are like, oh, when are you going to come visit us in Curitiba? And I'm like, but I'm in Bahia. Like, why don't you guys come up here?
I've come all the way from the US. You can come up to here, right?
Right?
Wow.
Exactly.
So your first husband, was he also a, what do you call it, a drummer?
Yeah.
So I can imagine the reaction of the immigration people. Hey, this is a second Brazilian drummer.
Well, yeah, exactly. The thing is, not every, but almost every long-term relationship I've ever had has been someone from the rhythm section, either a drummer or a bass player. My current partner is a bass player, and an ex that I had a very long, happy relationship was a bass player. So That's why it's all about the rhythm and the flavor.
That's your
He's the
niche,
rhythm,
right?
I'm the flavor. Yeah, exactly.
Wow, amazing, amazing. Ah, beautiful. Let's move forward. We can do an entire
Okay.
episode on Brazil because we both love Brazil very
Right.
dearly. But you know, there's a saying that says, change your story, change your life. And by story, I mean what you tell yourself in your head all day long. So, how did you, Laurelann, change your story internally at your lowest time in your life to change? How did you change your story internally to change the reality externally?
Well, I mean, that is the story. It was that whole process
Mm,
of the critical autoethnography, learning all these new skills in shamanic energy medicine and dream tending, and learning how did I change the way I told my story. I think it's because when we do that work, when we do the work that we do, when we go through the medicine wheel, part of the work that we do there is looking back at our story and seeing where it came from and just practicing exercises. Like we actually have an exercise that we do where you tell two stories of your life. One of them begins, once upon a time, a stork brought the baby to the wrong house. And then you tell your whole life from that perspective. And
mm,
then you tell your life from the perspective, once upon a time, a stork came and brought the right baby to the right house. And then you tell the same life through that perspective. It's a really fascinating exercise because it helps you see very, very clearly how perspective is everything.
mm, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about your business. Tell us about what is your impact in the world and how are you making the world a better place in your own way with your rhythms.
Mm.
What is it? Rhythms and what again? Rhythms and
The rhythm and the flavor.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I do have a couple of different businesses. We have the band, we have the production company, and I have my healing services company. But I want to answer that question in a slightly different way because it's not specifically about the business
Mm,
that is how I'm making an impact. And this is something that came up to me so many times during my training. I kept getting messages, hints, intuition that I wasn't supposed to think of this as like some sort of transactional exchange, that I was supposed to just be this, be a shaman in life, and trust that my world is going to increasingly become more well
mm,
because I'm walking this path and I'm having that influence in my family, my friendships, my community, my world, my planet. Because I would say at least 25% of the work that I do on a weekly basis, there is no client. It's conducting ceremony for the benefit of the earth.
mm,
So, I'm not going to charge myself for that. I just know that I need to do it.
mhm,
So, and then of course, the impact that I have when people come to me for services is that what I do is I, as a shaman, I take the person's intention, their intention to heal whatever it is they want to heal. They have to come with an intention. And I hold space for it in sacred space and I amplify it. And then I assist them by clearing any stagnant energy and filling it with divine light. And so what that does is that helps the person, it helps their own decisions to have a healthier, better life be supported by the universe, by spirit, by God, by whatever you want to call it. So it starts out as one by one, but even in group ceremony, like anytime we're doing these kinds of ceremonies to heal ourselves, to heal each other, to heal the planet, we might not notice what impact we're having in the moment. But when I look back, I go, oh, okay. I can see how it's subtle shifts. And we just have to trust that when we keep doing the work of being a conscious human in the world, forgiving who we need to forgive, walking with no fear, having no enemies, not engaging when people trigger us, just walking that path, that alone does volumes energetically for the people that are in our environment.
Mhm. Love that. Love that. What would you say is your avatar?
My client avatar.
Yes.
It's funny. I played around with this in one of those, business coaching workshops I did last year. And it seems like the client avatar is probably a graphic designer, but certainly someone who has some sort of creative aspect to their work or that they wish they did.
Mm.
So someone who either has had their creativity quashed by, whatever life job thing they've had to do, that's ideal. People who are conscious and awakening, but maybe just need a little guidance to get themselves to the next step, or artists who want to deepen their creative practice with shamanism.
I see. What is the main pain point that you're solving for your clients? The number one pain point.
I am not a huge fan of pain point marketing, I have to say. But I would say probably for folks who are really craving deep transformation and don't know where to begin or don't know how to begin.
Speaking of that, share with us an example of the most remarkable transformation you've seen from one of your clients.
Let's see. Well, one of my clients, when she started my program in Butterfly Boot Camp, um, had some physical issues that she was working with that she wanted to heal. And also simultaneously, she was like, oh, I never dream. I never remember my dreams. I don't dream. Well, after 6 months, she started bringing her dreams to the table after believing her
Wow.
whole life that she didn't dream. And I've seen her express so much more life and ease with, she talks about how her symptoms have gone down. They haven't gone away, but that the whole process has helped her with these physical conditions that she has to be present with them in a healthier way.
Mhm.
So I think because people sometimes go, oh, I want to heal my, whatever it is, my cancer, my this, my that. Shamanism doesn't specifically work that way.
Mm.
What it does is we work with the client to create the conditions for wellness.
Mm.
So what often happens is that physical ailments can fall away when you do the work to create the conditions for wellness. But sometimes if there's been a history or if there's been a diagnosis already, it makes it a lot harder for that energetically to release because there's proof and there's evidence, and that becomes fixated as a line of destiny, basically. And so what we encourage people to do is if you are going to have a test done, have a shamanic energy medicine healing session before you go,
Mm.
because it can help to, if it hasn't been spotted or diagnosed yet, it can help to let it pass through. Once it's been diagnosed, it's really much harder to clear.
I see. How are you getting your clients?
At this point, it's been mostly word of mouth, although recently I have had some good result with some bundling packages that have come around. And so I've been getting um, an increase to my list that way, which is great. But really, most of my clients have come to me through word of mouth.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's start wrapping things up. And to finish, I'd like to ask you a series of rapid fire questions on advices. Ready?
Okay.
What's the best piece of advice you've received so far in your life?
Oh my God, the best piece of advice. Don't let the small things get you down.
Love that.
Yeah.
What's the worst piece of advice you received so far?
Opposites attract.
Mhm.
I don't think that's good advice for anybody. I think that sets people up for a lot of heartbreak.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Imagine that you were blessed with a time machine. You can go back in time and sit face to face with the 18-year-old version of yourself. What's a first piece of advice you would give to her, knowing all that you know now?
Oh boy. What would I say to my 18-year-old self? Um,
Go to Brazil sooner. Yeah.
um, he is not the one.
Ah, okay.
That's all. He is not the one. I think I knew that already at 18, but yeah, he is not the one.
Do you have your own podcast?
Well, I don't have a podcast, but I do have a YouTube channel. And so I'm starting a series September 1st,
Beautiful.
which is going to be following my own journey through another round of the medicine wheel.
Okay. Now, imagine that today you're interviewing the most special person in the world, and that is yourself.
Mm.
What's the first piece of question? Say, what's the first question you want to ask yourself? Don't think too much. First thing that comes to your mind.
Oh my God. How did you get here?
Wow.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, what's the answer?
I feel like I want to start singing the Talking Head song. Well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by.
Singing and drumming your way, right?
I did. I got here singing. I sang my way here.
Oh,
I
yeah.
sang my way here. Yeah,
You
that's my
know, one of
answer.
my saying is life is a buffet, meaning we're here to try not only all the delicious dishes from around the world, but also all the experiences and everything that the world and life have to offer us.
Love it. Love it.
And
Yep.
so
The
awesome.
smorgasbord of life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, the last question I ask, and that's my favorite question to ask all my guests, and that is, what is the smallest thing? And by small, I don't mean something small. I mean the one thing that you've done that has had the greatest, deepest, most impactful impact in both your life and your business. For example, for me, it's been starting my podcast. What about you?
Uh Listening to the crazy ideas when they come through.
And you know what? Those crazy ideas, that's our soul talking to us.
Right? Right? Yeah.
And our soul has two main purposes: to protect us, keep us safe and alive, and to guide us to the next phase of our life. For example, if I were to look at my life and the 3 or 4 decisions that completely changed my life over the last 5 years have all come as a result of me listening to my inner voice and asking better questions.
Yeah.
This was actually the topic of my TEDx talk 2 weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Nice. Wonderful.
The wisdom within. Yes, absolutely.
For
So,
sure.
listen, absolutely honor, pleasure talking to you. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
The best way to connect with me is through my website, laurelannporter.com. Sign up for my new moon ceremonies. That gets you right on my mailing list. And then I send out I don't send like 7 messages a week like some people do. I usually send like once a week, maybe a couple times a month. That's the best way.
And I thought you would say the local churrascaria.
Well, I don't really eat meat anymore, even though
Oh,
my son is like, Mom, you swore you would never give up meat. I'm like, I know, but I just don't enjoy it as much as I used to. I think part of it is this whole path when
okay.
you feel how your body responds to,
Okay.
certain foods, it makes it easier to give them up.
Yes. 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 All right. Listen, I loved our conversation. We can talk for hours, and we haven't even talked about Brazil at all. We can do on
A
that.
tiny
We'll
bit.
do that maybe another time. So listen, I salute you. You're treated with art. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world. Your presence, your impact, your smile, everything you do, and keep sharing your gifts. Stay safe. Stay awesome. God bless you, my friend. And talk to you very soon. Take care, my friend.
Thanks so
Cheers.
much. I'll see you soon.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye bye.